Pioneer Knowledge Services welcomes you to the next Because You Need to Know. I'm your host, Edwin K. Morris. I serve as president and founder of this organization, and we are thrilled to offer this educational program. These design conversations bring you people's experiences from all over the globe in the field of knowledge management, nonprofit work, and innovation.
Thank you for listening to Because You Need to Know, the reference podcast in knowledge management. My name is Soni Toneme. As an art administrator, Because You Need to Know has been my go-to podcast and has helped me hone my management skills. Please consider sponsoring the podcast with your business.
My name is Blake Melnick. I live in the beautiful city of Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. Recently voted the best small city in the world to visit by Condé Nast. I'm the Chief Knowledge Officer for the Knowledge Management Institute of Canada and co-founder and principal catalyst for workplace partnerships at WinCan, the Workplace Innovation Network for Canada, a not-for-profit we created back in 2018, which is dedicated to increasing Canada's capacity and capability for innovation. And I am also the host of the podcast series For What It's Worth with Blake Melnick. So I've been involved in the field of knowledge management and the learning sciences pretty much for my entire career. And I love working at the intersection point of KM and workplace innovation, especially employee-led innovation. So I help organizations design and develop innovation ecosystems to drive performance and build sustainable cultures of innovation and excellence. My most recent research has been around identifying the attributes of the innovation-capable graduate and the innovation-enabled employee, specifically the skills, knowledge, experience, and mindset necessary for unlocking the innovation dynamic. Our team has just completed a global knowledge synthesis of exemplary innovation practices, largely from Europe, because they're much further ahead at this than we are, in support of the idea that an increase in employee innovation leads to better work. So what do I mean by better work? Well, better for the employees in terms of the quality of their work life, and better for the organization in terms of their performance. We've collected this research to see whether we can adapt the findings and the models from Europe and elsewhere to a Canadian context. And the results of this research are set to be published by the Future Skills Centre at the Government of Canada shortly. But if folks are interested in learning more about this now, we have a number of blog posts published at wincan.ca, and they can listen to my interviews with participants in the research on For What It's Worth in our series, The Many Faces of Innovation, which is a series really designed to democratize innovation, to make it understandable, accessible, and actionable to us all through the telling of personal stories from innovators across multiple fields of endeavor, who give us a ringside seat on their innovation journeys. So leveraging the knowledge, know-how, and experience of employees to build and sustain cultures of innovation is critical for enabling organizations and individuals to adapt to the changing landscape.
We talk about innovation, and it's almost a catchphrase in a lot of ways, but can you define for me what innovation actually is?
So let's look at the difference between invention and innovation, because I think there's a misconception that most people have. Innovation is more incremental. So something brand new to the world that the world has never seen before, that's an invention.
Okay.
An improvement on an idea, whether it's yours or somebody else's, or another concept, or even an invention, an improvement upon that is an innovation.
For clarity, I pulled up the Merriam-Webster definition of innovation, and it's funny you say the distinction between, because that's the first thing they bring up is the distinction between innovate and invent. So invention, as far as Merriam goes, can refer to a type of musical composition, a falsehood, a discovery, or any product of the imagination. The sense of invention, most likely to be confused with innovation, is a device, contrivance, or process originated after study and experiment, usually something which was not previously been in existence.
Right.
Innovation, on the other hand, can refer to something new or to a change made to an existing product, idea, or field. One might say that the first telephone was an invention.
Right.
The first cellular telephone, either an invention or innovation, and the first smartphone, an innovation.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting walk through technology and how the differences are.
Part of the problem is that when we talk about invention, I mean, people immediately jump to Elon Musk or somebody that has deep pockets or a well-funded university lab, Stanford or some other place like that, requires lots of venture capitalist fund and lots of people.
Yeah.
And I think our goal really is to say, no, innovation is accessible to everyone.
Because it's not that mystique oriented, really. It's just,
No,
it's
it's not.
somebody with some intent to either perfect or add to something else. And an idea can be created anywhere.
That's correct. That's correct. And it really doesn't matter what you do for a living.
Well, and you bring that up with the idea of this culture of innovation. How do you bring a workforce into play to where innovation is second nature?
Well, again, we're talking about culture, so that is a long road. Here's my experience is that people spend a lot of their lives going to school, studying to become really good at something. My experience shows that people want to do great work. They've spent a lot of time learning how to do great work. Unfortunately, a lot of organizational structures prevent them from doing great work. So cultures of innovation, like cultures of knowledge and knowledge management, is that part of the challenge is removing the barriers that prevent people from doing their best work.
Can you give the listener an example of what that would look like?
Within an organization, much the same, because again, I think it's important for me to stress that I think knowledge management and innovation are opposite sides of the same coin. They're part and parcel of the same thing. For example, those organizations with better knowledge processes and practices tend to be more innovative. Designing a culture of innovation means ultimately at the core, it's all about behaviors. It's about recognizing the types of behaviors associated with a mindset for innovation. And other guests on your show have said, you have to be able to identify the behaviors that you're looking for from people that join your organization or people that work within your organization. You have to recognize them formally in terms of how they're assessed through their performance appraisals. That has to be part of it. And it's going to look different depending on which functional area you work in within the organization. You have to reward and recognize people for innovative behaviors, for constantly trying to evolve their best practices. We hear a lot about best practice. I actually hate that term because why would you want to stop there? People say, well, we want you to adopt or implement best practices. Well, so to what end?
Yes, to what end, right? The best practice in my mind is a step to the next thing, right?
Exactly.
It levels up a little bit and then you get ready to do it again.
Right.
It's an iterative learning process.
Absolutely.
But I get what you're saying. The use of it is like a lessons learned kind of thing. It just, once it happens, okay, we're done.
Exactly.
We're good.
And so, it's that constant evolution beyond your best practice. So it's fine to say, go outside and say, well, this is a really good idea that's worked at Volvo. We could adapt that for use within our own organization, but we need to evolve it, of course, number one, to fit the culture of our organization and our workflow processes. We have to continually evolve it. It's not a once it's in and done, it's over, right? It's a continuous process. So within organizations, we really need to create the structures that allow people to be innovative. So let me give you an example with a company that I've been working with recently, an engineering firm, which, they have innovation in their core values, very important for the company, and they want to get people engaged in innovation. So what prevents people from being engaged in innovation? Well,
fear.
Largely it's culture. Fear, absolutely. Fear is probably number one, right? Plus, the constraints of their own job description and what they're being measured against is often not that innovative behavior that they would like to exhibit. So, but what this organization did was they tried to define innovation using an analogy of a t-shirt to encourage people to engage in innovation, perhaps outside their areas of expertise or the job description. They framed it this way. An extra small t-shirt is a change that you can make within a week that doesn't require a lot of extra resources, but something that you see as the employee doing the work that will make things better. We will give you the time to do that. If the innovation is bigger, like a large t-shirt, for example, that may require resources. So that has to go through a vetting process. So they have employees contribute ideas into what they call an idea hopper, and then they vet these ideas. Okay, well, what can we do to test this idea on a small scale first? to deliver some sort of metric that then we can build upon and move beyond that. So they're actually creating a mechanism for all employees when they see something that they can make better in the context of their day-to-day work, they have permission to do it. If it's not going to cost a lot of money, the firm will actually give them the money and the time to do it.
Well, wait a minute. So that kind of goes against what most people would assume or have experienced, I'll say, in my experience, is that I can remember many times where I'm like, hey, if you did this differently, or did you guys think of doing this? The usual pushback is, where do you work? Why are you talking to us? Those types of, this is not in your job description. Go away.
Right.
You're not an expert in this.
Yeah. And it is a challenge. And even this firm has found that to be a challenge because particularly with new employees, they're afraid to extend themselves too much.
Stick their neck out. Exactly. And that's a change of behavior. That's a change of culture. Once you start getting the dinosaurs out the window that enforce that type of, and you get more of an innovative, open air kind of culture to happen. In this case you're speaking of, I'm just curious, who owns that piece of it? Who owns the construct that lives in?
Well, yes. I mean, they have an innovation team. So not where they want to end up, but where they had to begin just to get the ball rolling. So they have an innovation team of people from across the organization that work together and try to figure out ways to get people to engage in innovation outside their area of expertise. Tough road, there's no doubt about it, but they have strong corporate support. They have identified sort of buckets that employees can look at and say, and one of them is efficiency and effectiveness. Mm-hmm. Another one is revenue generation. And a third bucket is culture.
Wow.
If the innovation is going to positively impact the culture of the organization, then that fits within sort of the stated strategy of the company.
Wow. I would say that's brave. That's a brave thing to do.
Right.
Because I could see it making a division in camps, so to speak, of people that are going to be like, oh my God, make this thing go away,
Right. Sure.
And on the other side of it, it's like, oh, I've been sitting on this idea since I got here. Thank you.
Well, what I found in most organizations I've worked with, and you probably experience this as well, is that the things that keep the executives up at night, those big problems, why does this thing keep happening? Why are we losing money in this area? Why are we not meeting our production schedules? And so on and so forth. The answers usually lie within the heads of people within the organization.
Yeah.
Right? But we don't provide a mechanism for those people to actually get the answers up to the decision makers, or to fix the problem as they see it happen. So as you know, like the roots of knowledge management, part of it is the TQM movement, total quality movement, which was largely driven by the automotive industry in Japan in the late 60s and early 70s, where they recognized that the employees on the line, if they see a problem in the manufacturing process of the vehicle, they could stop the line and say, there's a problem here. We need to address this. So it's empowering those people with the ability to say, hey, we can do it better. We need to stop the process and look at this and stop continuing to make the same mistake over and over again. So it's the same kind of principle around innovation. I mean, it's creating those things. But unfortunately, like knowledge management and innovation, they appear on placards of most corporations, but it's not really actionable because they haven't aligned their structures to drive the outcomes they're looking for. So, I think it was Peter Senge that said, your structures are perfectly designed to give you the outcomes you're currently experiencing. If you don't like those outcomes, you must change your structures. And that means alignment. Alignment of people, process, technology, everything in your organization has to align to drive the outcomes you're looking for. And that includes the onboarding process, mentoring, professional development, all of those types of things have to be aligned. But it really does. The organizations that I've seen do it very well, both in terms of knowledge management and innovation, are those that can take it to the behavioral level.
Well, let's talk about that. How would you recommend to a organization that wants to get there, would love to try this? What are the first three things you're going to tell them that they need to do?
The way my process has always started is that I start with a meeting with the executives and try to figure out what their corporate priorities are, what their strategy is, what it is they hope to achieve. Then I like to get a benchmark of where the organization is against those priorities. If I was doing it in the space of knowledge management or innovation, because we use diagnostics for both, a knowledge audit that actually lets the executives know where the employees are at, where their organization is at with respect to being able to achieve those corporate objectives. Same with innovation. So we have a workplace innovation diagnostic, which kind of sets a baseline for the organization of how innovative it is actually, whether there are opportunities involved that allow people to bring innovation to their work, to their job, or what are the barriers that are preventing this from happening? So I think that's the critical piece, is to get that benchmark. Then you can start to establish your metrics.
Do you see any industry that does it better over others? Is there an industry that's just really good at this by nature?
Here would be, from my experience, and it really depends on what you mean by better. There's certainly software industries, Google and so forth, does a really good job with this, of course. I would also say, though, that public companies, and I don't mean publicly traded companies, although they tend to be better too. I think when I say public companies, government organizations, for example, universities are particularly good with this. And there's a reason for it, because they don't really have to worry about their performance and whether they're their jobs, right? So the best example I've seen in terms of the behavioral level has been the Bank of Canada. They did what I would consider an exceptional job at this, right? By identifying what are the behaviors that we want from our people, and then actually rolling those into the hiring process, rolling them into the performance appraisals. And then from the knowledge piece, in other words, in order to make knowledge flows better within the organization, and they used a lot of technology for this, but they created an environment that said, okay, if you've got a great idea, you can bring it to this innovation space. You can book time in this innovation space to flesh out this idea, to work with this idea. And then they had a knowledge lab that had a completely different function. And the knowledge lab was to disseminate the work that was going on within this innovation space to everybody in the company. And how did they do that? They have a very robust technology infrastructure. So they have screens everywhere, cafeteria all through the building. All of the stuff that was going on in the innovation space was being projected out throughout the entire building to every person that wanted to watch. The idea behind it was then to get people who said, hey, you know what? I really like what they're doing over in this area, in research, for example, or in economics. I have something to add to that. So then they created a hoteling-like structure within the organization where you didn't have a defined office space. You could book space in any area of the company. So if you saw an idea or a group working an idea that you thought was particularly interesting, or something that you could bring value to, or something that somebody was doing that there may have already been a lot of work done that they were not aware of, you can simply book a space within that group and begin to work with that group real time.
That's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
The closest thing I can even put into that was I saw it when I was deployed to Iraq. We had one command structure that would take people and push them out to different commands and different levels of the war front to give them a boots and ground kind of internship at that level, so they would have a better and thicker understanding of everything that's out there. And so that's what it sounds like. But you're given free agency. It sounds like they've got free agency to say, I think I'm going to go hang out with these dudes for a week or two just to see.
Yeah, I can spend as much time as I want.
Holy cow. Wow. Well, while you were talking about this, I looked at Bank of Canada, excuse me. I looked at Bank of Canada and did a quick search on innovation. And this is what I found. How do we evolve and advance our work to prepare for the future? Harnessing the power of innovation. And so they are taking this at a very high priority of not just existence or thriving, but preparing to evolve.
Yeah. So a lot of these, what we call crown corporations, like the Bank of Canada, and we have a Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. I did some work with them. What they did, which I also thought was extremely interesting, was they wanted help solving affordable housing. A problem that we're all experiencing in the United States, in Canada, and elsewhere. Big problem.
Yeah.
What we were able to do with them was we were able to create a prototype program called Knowledge Management and Workplace Innovation, using the challenge, the innovation challenge of advancing solutions to the affordable housing crisis in Canada. So a real world problem. We brought students in from around the world, not just virtually, to advance ideas for solving the problem. And what we did, and Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation was particularly great about this, is they gave us their expertise. They gave us all the background documentation. So we started with the research, and then students were able to review that research, engage with experts at the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, and then start to advance potential ideas for addressing this problem. It's a fairly acute problem, and there was a time frame attached to it. So I think it's 2030 or 2030, we were supposed to have affordable housing for all Canadians, which represents 30% of a person's income towards housing, which we're not even close to being at the moment. But it had a strong mandate, and these students started advancing ideas in a real world context, dealing with a real innovation challenge. At the end of it, they presented their findings to the board of directors, and we were very happy that the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation recognized that this was a sort of a micro credential, but they actually went one step further and said, we recognize this credential, and it was theirs as well. They helped us build it. They recognize this credential and will recognize it in their hiring practices.
That's a great thing to have it actually materialize as a valuable item, right? I mean, that helps to build a benefit other than the knowledge. I mean, it's a benefit to the worker. So what is the future of WinCan?
Well,
and tell me what WinCan is for.
Sure.
What's the aim?
Sure. Let me start where it all began. So it began with a conversation in 2015 between myself and Dr. Tom Carey, who we've known each other a long time. And we looked at Canada's track record around innovation in terms of impact to GDP. And it's not good. It's not good. We rank one of the lowest of similar countries in the world because there's all kinds of reasons: geography, population, market size. But fundamentally, we're good innovators. They're good innovators in Canada. We're just not really good at commercializing our innovation or taking it that final step. I guess, there's a lot of structures in our society, both at the education side and the employment side, where we haven't created structures to support sustainable innovation. In schools, we learn things in silos. We don't encourage students to see the connections between domains of knowledge. We think that they're all separate. We treat education and work as two separate worlds, right? As opposed to an integrated world. So Tom and I talked about this, and Tom said, well, do you think that knowledge management could be a conduit or a bridge between the world of work and the world of academia? And I said, yes, I do think it could be. So that's how it began. So we looked at, how do we make innovation systemic? There's lots of great innovation that goes on, but it's either not sustainable and certainly not systemic. Mm-hmm. So how do we make it systemic? Well, we have to ensure, in order to make it systemic, we have to ensure that every graduate is innovation capable and every employee is innovation enabled. So we started to look at, well, what is innovation, right? Really, because everybody uses the word. Not many people really know how to define it very effectively or action it. Yeah. So we started to do a lot of research around the mindsets, the skills, the experience, and the knowledge of innovators. And mindset is really kind of where we zeroed in. Is there a mindset for innovation? And yes, there is a mindset for innovation. So that's how we started.
Okay.
As we build out WinCan, we really are driving a research-supported solutions to innovation challenges. So what we're doing with WinCan, we're a catalyst organization. We know that there's lots of money in government going out to innovation. There's lots of people that are trying to get engaged in it. What we're trying to do is be the catalyst for it. So we're asking, bring us your problems. Bring us the things that are keeping you up at night, and we will help you to solve those. And we'll do that through our research, because we do a global reach in terms of our research. the best and the brightest people that have been very successful at it. We're adapting models. So we'll bring that to workplace organizations and we'll help them implement some of the best practices.
Everything seems to be around the workplace, or I'll say adult learning.
Right.
When do you bring innovation into grade school?
And I agree with you. It needs to be at that K to 12 level.
I'm looking at the WIPO.INT website, which is the Global Innovation Index. And they've just released a 2023 report. So I was just taking a look at some figures here. So I just wanted to bring this into the conversation.
Sure.
Just so everybody knows, what country is the absolute top-ranked innovation country? And it's Switzerland.
Yeah.
Underneath that's U.S., Sweden, Singapore, United Kingdom, Finland, Netherlands. So those are like the top cluster. They've got a beautiful chart here. And so there is a lot of people apparently putting money into the idea that innovation matters.
Absolutely. Again, you have to, the rankings, it depends on who you go to for the ranking.
Okay.
I've seen different rankings, but, a country like Switzerland, right? I mean, think of Switzerland. They don't really have any natural resources. They've relied largely historically on the banking system, right? Innovation tends to happen most when there are constraints. Israel is also an extraordinarily innovative country, right? Denmark is incredibly innovative, but there's a lot of constraints. They don't have, I guess, the abundance of natural resources that we have in the United States and Canada. They have a different approach to supporting innovation. So let me give you an example of Israel. Israel uses, at least in the funding area, so Canada puts a lot of money into innovation. We're just not getting a lot out of it at the end. But Israel does it differently. So Israel provides direct funding for innovation. We tend to provide indirect funding. In other words, we give money to the universities who then in turn partner with the innovator. What tends to happen is a bun fight over IP. We take a very safe approach in Canada where it's easier to fund our own. So we're already obligated to fund our universities. We tend to put money into the crown corporations, which are part of the government. So it's a safer approach, where Israel says, no, we'll fund the innovator. The innovator will then create partnerships with universities, but based on the need of the innovator and not on the need of the university, needs of the innovator. And if the product passes a few number of gates to be viable, the government becomes the first customer. In other words, they agree to buy the innovation and developing the business within the country. In Canada, we tend to stop short of that. And you can listen to some of the interviews on my podcast about this, where we recognize something being of value. We put money into it at the front end, at the prototype stage, but then we provide no money to take it to market and we don't buy it. And then the innovator takes their innovation to the United States. It's a risk adverse.
Oh my.
You see, this is the problem, right? Is innovation requires taking a risk. So that's the challenge.
Yeah. You're taking innovation to an entrepreneurial level. There's a bridge there. You're going from innovation that an organization is within an organization, but you're talking about innovating in order to bring something to market, to have an economy behind it. So now you're talking about, not all innovators are good entrepreneurs, I'm sure.
Oh, that's true.
So there's a piece missing there, and can it be approached?
Well, let me also differentiate between an entrepreneur and an intrapreneur.
Okay.
Right? Because I think this is another important distinction. So when we're talking about organizations and innovation within organizations, we're talking about intrapreneurialism, right? Or entrepreneurs rather than entrepreneurs. So they are innovating within the constructs or the confines of the organization for which they work.
Okay.
In certain cases, we're not typically funding, government is in Canada, not typically funding, intrapreneurs. They're funding more the entrepreneurial innovator. Okay. It doesn't necessarily mean, for example, that, again, it's an invention never seen before in the world. It could be an adaptation of something that already exists in a different context for a different purpose, driving a different outcome. I think it's an important distinction to make, is that, within organizations, we're really talking about entrepreneurialism, right? The people are able to innovate within the constructs or within the confines of organizational structure. So they're two different things. But really, Wincan's objective is to become that catalyst, in a sense, to become a knowledge hub. Because what we find is that a lot of times great ideas start, they become funded, or the funding ends, and then the idea kind of just
Yeah.
goes away. And then the next round of funding starts, and they start right from the beginning. And we think there's a much greater value, much greater chance of creating an innovative country if we build on the work that's come before,
Yeah.
rather than reinventing the wheel over and over and over again.
You think about most large things that have hit the human framework in the era of innovation, which goes back to, I'm sure, the wheel. The idea that it's just a one and done kind of thing, I want to hit again, because if you look at research around certain things, there are like a little steps made here, and then somebody takes it over here,
Right.
and then somebody else takes it over this way. And then, so it is a matter of years and maybe decades before something actually clicks. But it had to happen in order for somebody else to say, to spur another idea, to spur another innovation,
Right.
So there are certain things that are destined to fail just because they had to happen in order for something else to spin out of that.
Right.
Another industry that I think is good in this idea of parallel thinking here with the length of time it took to get to something to market was the idea of mechanical type. So if you look at the documentary called California Typewriter, it talks about all the failed inventors that had tried making a typewriter in all these different iterations and all these different styles. And it took decades of people just keep plugging away to get something that would work.
Right.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that just because it failed on paper at this juncture doesn't mean anything in the grand scope of things.
Exactly. I'd say something about failure. I'd never liked that term failure, fail fast and all this. It's only a failure if you don't learn anything or if you stop, right? So to your point, every invention, every great innovation in human history has been the result of people building on the work of their predecessors. They don't just start from the scratch. They go, okay, that didn't work. And why didn't it work? And so this is why it didn't work. But the premise might have been sound, and they build on top of that and take it in a different direction. We see the same in the software world. Agile development, the gaming industry does this all the time. Software companies do it all the time. They build off-ramps in case it needs to go in a different direction that they hadn't anticipated. So the notion of failure to me is really a mental model. It's not a failure. I would say it's more you didn't get the outcomes you were expecting. So if you stop there and say, well, it failed, I'm abandoned it.
Done.
Or if you say, well, what did work here? Or what can we build upon? Or at least to capture that instance in such a way that other people can go back. This is the scientific method. I mean, sort of understands this, I think, right?
But see, the thing is that most corporations, I'm going to say this in a generalization, see if you agree, most corporations will let something hang out there and dry, and if it didn't work, they're just like, move on.
Yeah,
Either they fire somebody or there's some kind of punitive something going on, because they don't look at it as a learning cycle. Hey, we've spent money on this. Just like you said, what could we gain from this for the organization out of this experience? And maybe there is a to-do out of this in 10 years. Nobody knows this yet.
Right.
If we don't ever do anything with that knowledge in a proactive way in order to revive it again, then it is money out the window for sure.
What's the biggest problem in most organizations? Well, there's probably two. One is redundancy, and the other is repetition of past mistakes. Because we haven't retained the knowledge of the people that have tried it before. Right? So we just keep doing the same thing over and over.
It's like it's a new day. Start over.
Right.
Heard a story about this at a very large university, and she said that they were assembled in this team for this thing that happens every 4 years, some evaluation. And it was like nobody knew what they were doing. They grabbed these people up and they spent all this time trying to figure out what was done before in order to help them figure out what to do now, because there was nobody on this assembled team
Right.
that had any prior knowledge.
Right.
They had to start from scratch, and they built all this. They checked the block, whatever the requirement was. Yep, done. And then poof,
Yep.
all gone. You know, it was like there was not even a recovery of any kind of live connection with anybody that was part of this team. Because, you know, the bad thing is it's predictable. It's going to happen again in 4 years. Wouldn't you think they would put some assets towards trying to make it easy on the next time? Nope.
You've spent some time in the military, so you know this. I mean, this is what the military is particularly adept at, is the after-action review. And we use technology to fly missions ahead of time to see what might happen. But every time a mission is completed, there's a formal after-action review. What went well? What didn't go well? What do we need to fix in the future? How do we need to address this to keep our soldiers safe?
Another thing that's well established in the military is rehearsals.
Yes.
We rehearse, we do sand tables, we rehearse, we go over things, phase lines, and then this is going to happen and that's going to happen. We orient everybody to the mission. I have never seen that in any civilian structure.
No.
I think of the cohesiveness that could really build if we just did some rehearsals of whatever the mission is. Whatever, you know, and maybe it's not the same bucket. I get that. It's not the same, you know, execute, go do this. But it kind of is on a project level.
Yep.
And why don't we put those efforts in?
Well, and we certainly have the technology to do that. I mean, I've spent time in aerospace, as you know, and I ran a simulation engineering firm. So we built simulators and simulations to do just that.
Yeah.
Pre-mission simulations, right? Flying a helicopter, landing on an oil rig in the North Sea during inclement weather, and what could go wrong. We have that same capability in for businesses as well. So let me give you a really good example.
Okay.
Engineering firm is they decided that, you know, they were looking at how can we attract better talent to our organization. All applicants come through engineering schools. They all have the same background. They all have the same degree. How do we get to the best ones, right? So what they did was they employed a simulation, and they said, okay, so do you want to find out what it's like to work for our firm? What we want you to do is we're going to take you through a virtual walkthrough of a project that we're working on, a building. We want you to advance solution to some of the problems that our own engineers are experiencing on the job site. Students walking through. So students are saying, well, you know, you could do this to fix that support beam and so on and so forth. But the intangible piece of it is they got to see how people communicated with one another, how they were willing to put their ideas out into a public space. It also gave the potential hiree the ability to feel what it would be like working this job with this company, right? So it was a win-win on both sides. But it was brilliant because they captured all of this. They captured all the knowledge, all the suggestions, all the possibilities that were being advanced by prospective hires. So that became part of the knowledge base of the organization.
That's pretty cool.
We can be doing this all the time. There's a lot of people that now are advocating a pre-mortem, which is essentially what you're saying. What could go wrong? Let's play this out. And this could be on pen and paper and on whiteboard.
Yep.
Doesn't require advanced simulation-based technology. But let's do a pre-mortem. Let's see what could happen here. Imagine the worst and the best, and you know, so that we can anticipate.
Something in the middle. Yeah. I like that. I'm going to take that one. I like that very much. I think that's a very useful tool, and it kind of it can get you to a mind space with the folks around the table to at least start engaging the future. And that's a big piece of this.
Right. Right. And it is, you're right. And I love your point about mindset, because it is all about mindset. I mean, everything we've talked about is about having the right mindset for this. There are skills associated with innovation, and there's experience and knowledge to draw upon and all of those types of things. But it really is a mindset saying that, you know, we can make this better. I've seen what I would call serial innovators, and they're not people that you would necessarily know, but they walk into a situation, they look at something and they go, hey, this is great, but wonder, what if, right?
Yeah. In most organizations, that's where you get the people throwing spitballs at that person. Hey, who are you? Who are you? What are you doing? What are you talking about?
Right. It comes down to identifying behaviors in such a way that, let's call it mid-management, can't prevent or are more incentivized to encourage their people to take risks, calculated risks, risks, obviously, to improve something, understanding that that person who is working that job on a day-to-day understands that better than everybody else because they're doing it. So they're seeing the problem. They're saying, look, we keep making the same mistake. A quick fix. So we just change this and let them do it.
I'd like to hear your definition of knowledge management.
Okay. Well, there's a good one. To me, knowledge management is not about, well, let me say what it isn't. You're not managing knowledge, right? Knowledge construction is a social process. So what you're really doing is managing the culture to ensure that knowledge flows effectively across the organization from those who know to those who need to know. It's about a number of things, but the one piece that most people miss, it's about knowledge creation. It's about knowledge capture. It's about knowledge retention. It's about knowledge sharing. It's about knowledge translation. The creation piece is the piece that most organizations miss. So it's really about managing the culture to create something or to create an environment where knowledge flows across the organization, where everybody knows what's going on in the organization, that understands the key strategic objectives for the corporation. And as an aside, here's something a little interesting. So for about 15 years, I've been doing this little survey with every company and group I've worked with, so across all sectors. And I ask employees, how important is it for you to know the strategic direction of the organization you work for? On a Likert scale of 1 to 10, I've never had anybody say less than 10.
What?
Employees need to know where the organization is going so they know how to contribute to that strategic vision. And it's super, super important. So that level of transparency, knowing where the company is going, says to me as the individual worker, I know now how I can contribute to that. Yeah. And I think that's the most important thing.
I love this conversation. I think the pieces of the puzzle are all, like you said, around mindset, culture, and innovation. As far as I can see, innovation and knowledge management are hand in hand, walking down the path, trying to get the culture to go forward.
Yeah, and I think innovation has just replaced knowledge management on a lot of the placards out there. I mean, it is on virtually every corporate value statement I've looked at in the last 5 years. But until we start to define what that looks like at the workflow level, at the behavioral level, it's just another buzzword.
Well, if we can see it instituted at the grade school and middle school level, then
that's a great point, and we should.
Then we'll have a shift. All right, my friend.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Great to be on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for joining this extraordinary journey, and we hope the experiences gained add value to you and yours. See you next time at Because You Need to Know. If your company or organization would like to help us continue this mission and sponsor one of our shows, email byntk@pioneer-ks.org.